United States, answering a few questions, reporters' questions, Israeli and American journalists asking questions. David Sanger is with me. You were watching very closely. Hovering over this, not only is the president's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia, but fear of Iran potentially developing some sort of nuclear capability. Also, Ukraine to a certain degree. They mentioned Ukraine. They're watching what's going on with the Russian, the brutal invasion of Ukraine, and that's hovering over these talks as well.
That's right, Wolf. And I think there was an important distinction between what you heard Prime Minister Lapid, who's obviously a caretaker prime minister right now, and President Biden. President Biden kept going back to the bedrock American phrase that the U.S. will never allow Iran to build a nuclear weapon. And what Prime Minister Lapid said, starting at the opening of his statement, was the entire free world must stop Iran if it continues with its nuclear program. Sounds like a semantic distinction, actually goes to the heart of the difference between the U.S. and Israel on this. Israel's fear is that by the time Iran actually got to a nuclear weapon, it would be too late to stop it. So they have been conducting sabotage operations, assassinations, to slow the enrichment of uranium. President Biden has said, and said again today, a diplomatic solution is the best way to get this done. That's why he's trying to restart the 2015 agreement. The problem is he's been trying that for 18 months now, and the Iranians aren't playing. And it's not clear at this point whether there's really any hope left that they would get into that agreement.
Very significant moment right now, the concern that the U.S. and Israel and some of the other states in the region, the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates, have as far as Iran is concerned, hovering over these talks. Very important. Caitlin Collins is our chief White House correspondent. Caitlin, you were there in the room. What was your thought?
Well, Wolf, of course, one of the biggest questions surrounding this trip has been whether or not he is going to bring up the brutal murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi when he does make his trip to Saudi Arabia tomorrow after he wraps up his first stop here in Israel during this 4-day swing through the Middle East. And the president was asked about that, and he said that his views on the killing of Khashoggi have been clear. Obviously, Wolf, those are references to comments he made on the campaign trail when he said he did believe it was a flat-out murder. He vowed to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for that and said that the current government, which is still the current government that he'll be meeting with when he goes there, has no social redeeming value. And so he said his views are clear, that if people in Saudi Arabia or anywhere else for that matter are not aware what his views on Khashoggi are, then they haven't been around very long. That was the quote that the president used. But when he was pressed directly on whether or not he will bring up Khashoggi in this meeting with the Saudi crown prince that he's expected to have in about 24 or 30 hours from now, Wolf, he hedged a bit. He said he always brings up human rights, but he did not say specifically that he will bring up Khashoggi. Obviously, Wolf, that is a very sensitive subject in the Saudi royal family, given the United States has assessed that the crown prince authorized the murder of this reporter. It was really a butcher more than a murder. And so that is going to be a big point of question looming over this entire trip. When you talk to U.S. officials and the president's top advisors, they know that. They are aware of that, and that will be a part. And they knew that they were going to be asked questions about that, Wolf. And so, of course, he's making the argument that there is a broader point to his trip, which is not just when it comes to oil production, but also security overall, and making sure there's not a vacuum of leadership in the region for places like China and Russia to make inroads. So that is going to be the argument that you're hearing from the White House. But it was notable that he did not specifically commit to mentioning Jamal Khashoggi's name, just saying that his views on what happened to him are clear.
Yeah, he says they're well known from the very, very beginning. Let me get reaction from the former U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Joseph Westphal, who's watching all of this very closely as well. Ambassador, thanks once again for joining us. What did you think about what the President of the United States said, and for that matter, what the Israeli Prime Minister said about Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, Wolf, I believe that the President is looking at this trip with a very long-term agenda. As he said, you know, his views on the Khashoggi murder and other issues with human rights are pretty plain and clear. But this trip is not about dealing with that issue directly with the Saudis. It's really about Iran. It's really about a future security agreement among all the Gulf states. Keep in mind that the Gulf states, for the most part, there's a lot of trade that goes on between them and Iran. It's undercover. It's it's in the cloak of darkness, but there's quite a bit of business activity going on from Oman all the way to Jordan. So I mean to Kuwait. So I think part of this is to solidify their agreement that Iran's not just nuclear weapons, but their activities in the regions have to be stopped. Wolf, when I was ambassador and I was leaving in 2017, in January of 2017 to return home, the king asked to see me, and I went to see him, and he said the following things. He said, Ambassador, please pass this message on to President-elect Trump. Tell him that first, we believe in the right of the State of Israel to exist. In fact, we believe that Judaism is the eminent place where Christianity and Islam were born from. And we want peace in the region, and we are very hopeful that there'll be a two-state solution with respect to the Palestinians. So the king feels strongly about the Palestinian situation, but I think Saudi Arabia has turned a whole new leaf about their opportunities to work with Israel and to improve relations and hopefully have diplomatic relations with them.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens, if the Saudis join the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, Morocco, some of these other countries in fully normalizing relations with Israel. We should find out fairly soon. Ambassador, thank you very much. Bianna, as you noted, the subject of Ukraine did come up in the remarks by Prime Minister Yair Lapid, as well as from the President of the United States. And it's interesting, at this particular moment, there are all these reports out there that Iran, from a military point of view, wants to help Russia in its battle against, in its invasion of Ukraine, for that matter. Give us some perspective on that.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Prime Minister Lapid. Actually, the first words he mentioned were not Iran, but Russia's unjust war in Ukraine. And there had been a lot of attention and focus and some criticism as to perhaps the lack of attention and the lack of aid that Israel had been providing to Ukraine since this war began. Israel had said that they'd been really put in a difficult position given their relationship with Russia, given that Russia is there in their backyard in Syria, and given the large Russian community within Israel, even though Israel is home to a large Ukrainian Jewish community as well. But the question of Iran is really at the top of mind, not only because of their nuclear program, but obviously because of their relationship with Russia, as Vladimir Putin is expected to travel to Iran next week for a summit with leaders there and with Turkish President Erdogan. And this comes on the heels of U.S. intelligence just this week alluding to Russia wanting to be or interested in purchasing drones from Iran, signaling that they are seeing a depletion in their own drones. There had been reports earlier, a few months ago, that China had suspended its sale of drones to Russia. So really interesting to hear that Iran possibly stepping up in this front, and obviously this bringing up the president and his comment, President Biden, today once again reiterating U.S. support for this unjust war in Ukraine, and telling Israeli television in that interview yesterday that the U.S. is there for however long it takes to help Ukraine defeat Russia and have Russian troops leave their soil.
Yeah, very significant indeed. Caitlin, I thought it was interesting, and let me just get your thoughts. I know there were two, it was called 2 and 2, 2 questions from American journalists, 2 questions from Israeli journalists. Those were the ground rules for this joint news conference that we heard from the president and the prime minister. But President Biden was not asked about what's going on back home as far as the U.S. economy is concerned and the high levels of inflation, 40-year highs right now, just announced yesterday. Were you surprised?
Yeah, just 2 questions. Of course, one of the most immediate, 2 pressing issues that he was asked about was this meeting that is happening tomorrow with MBS, and then also what is happening with Iran, given you see from what they were talking about here, where Lapid was pressing President Biden on Iran of how he thinks it should be handled, saying he doesn't think that just words will do the trick that they want to see. And instead, President Biden saying he believes diplomacy is the best pursuit here. So those were 2 very important topics, obviously, but so is the economy. And of course, President Biden is making this 4-day trip here with oil and security on his mind, but also an eye on what's happening back at home with the economy, because as soon as those numbers on inflation came out yesterday, the president issued a statement saying that he believed they were unacceptable but out of date. And his officials had been bracing for those numbers to be bad. They had been preparing reporters, coming out with talking points, basically giving their side of things before they came out. They were worse, I think, than what the White House expected when they actually came out, seeing that 9.1% inflation rate from year to year. And so, of course, that is still going to be something that he is dealing with. It is going to be something that's top of mind when they're talking about oil production, because they want to bring down gas prices. So that obviously is a huge topic here, Wolf. But also, one moment that really stood out when President Biden came into this press conference after his meeting with the prime minister was he said it was good to be here in the capital of Israel. Of course, Wolf, we are in Jerusalem. And later in the president's remarks, he praised the Abraham Accords that were formed during the Trump administration while Trump was in office, talking about how they not only believe that they've been impactful, but he wants to build upon them. That is a big point of talking here when it comes to normalizing relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, something that the president said he believes is going to take a long time, but is something that they are working on doing. It was a very notable statement that stood out when he said that he does believe Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, Wolf.
That's an important point as well. Hadass Gold is with us as well. Hadass, you're our Jerusalem correspondent, and you've been doing a lot of reporting on potentially trying to revive some sort of Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, which have been, for all practical purposes, at least dead in recent years. We did hear the president repeatedly say that the United States supports what's called a two-state solution. Israel alongside a new state of Palestine, both living in peace, both becoming democratic states. And President Biden is reiterating that right now. He's going to, before leaving for Saudi Arabia, he's going to be going to Bethlehem on the West Bank, and he's going to be meeting with the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Is there any realistic hope, and you've been doing a lot of reporting on this, Hadass, that Israeli-Palestinian peace talks can in fact get off the ground?
In short, Wolf, no. And I don't think that most Palestinians would be very pleased with what they heard at this press conference, especially right off the bat, as Caitlin noted, President Biden acknowledging that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. This was one of the Trump administration moves, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moving the embassy here. And he was specifically asked by an Israeli reporter about whether his visit tomorrow to an East Jerusalem hospital that mostly serves Palestinians, because keep in mind, Palestinians, they want East Jerusalem, the eastern part of the city, to be the potential future capital of a state of Palestine. And he is apparently not being accompanied by any Israeli officials. So there was a question of whether this is some sort of, symbolic gesture to the Palestinians that he does recognize that East Jerusalem could potentially be their future capital. And he said simply no, that it's no change to their position. Jerusalem is Israel's capital. And while we did hear his commitment to a two-state solution, there is just no political momentum either internally between the Israelis or the Palestinians towards any major moves towards peace. There's political chaos and uncertainty within both the Israelis and the Palestinians. There's a recognition by the Americans that there's just not going to be any sort of major moves towards that. And that's why during this visit, during this press conference, what we're hearing most about is, of course, Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's the focus of this visit. The Palestinian-Israeli peace process is sort of being put to the side, put on hold. President Biden, in his remarks, acknowledging that it's not going to happen in the near future.
Yeah, what the U.S. keeps saying, what others keep saying is that if Israel does in fact continue to develop these positive relations with other Arab countries, and now they've done so with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco, but if the Saudis, for example, were to emerge, that might help try to restart some Israeli-Palestinian peace talks as well. Let's see if that in fact does emerge down the road. All right, guys, everybody stand by. I want to go back to John and Brianna right now. They've got other important news that we're watching as well.
All right, thank you so much, Wolf. That was so interesting. And as Caitlin and Wolf just pointed out, one subject that was not asked about at this news conference was the U.S. economy. U.S. inflation hitting a 40-year high in June, rising 9.1% year to year. President Biden has said yesterday, he said the rise is unacceptably high. Joining me now is Heather Boushey, member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to play for you some sound of people that we have talked to at CNN who right now, they say they're suffering. Listen.
I'm not making ends meet. I'm not making it. I'm setting my savings. I get paid tomorrow and already my whole paycheck is spoken for. And it's the first time in my life I've had to apply for food stamps because I don't know how we're going to continue eating groceries.
Would you be able to afford to stay?
No. Oh, no. No, indeed. Not at all. I probably would have to move in with my kids or whatever.
So what can you say to these people this morning?
Well, certainly, as the president said yesterday in his statement, that inflation is unacceptably high, and this is a problem facing Americans all across the country. The president understands that. It is why he has focused so much of his attention doing everything in his power to reduce the high costs facing families. But let's be clear, some of the most significant steps that we could do right now are actually things that he needs to partner with Capitol Hill on. There are steps that Congress could take to reduce some of the big ticket costs facing families, and that legislation has been languishing over there. So the president takes this very seriously. It's one of the reasons he's focused so much on all the different steps he's taken to reduce energy prices facing Americans, allowing more oil to come from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, working with refiners to encourage them to be producing as much as they can at capacity, as well as putting on the table a federal gas tax holiday. So the president has taken a series of steps, but one thing that he wants to make clear is that while we have seen the price of oil fall significantly, we actually haven't seen prices at the pump fall as much. And so the president has also called on gas sellers to reflect those prices that Americans are paying. So this is a challenging issue, but the president has taken concrete steps to address it.
Gas prices have dropped 29 straight days, but Americans are going to need that extra money from the gas prices because the core rate of inflation month to month actually creeped up a little bit, which means everything else besides food and gas prices actually rising a little bit there. And one thing I also want to point out is based on the last measurements from other countries, the rate of inflation in the U.S. is higher than it is in Canada, France, Italy, Japan, India, Mexico, China. Why?
Well, here's a couple of things. I mean, first off, let's be clear. The bulk of the increases in prices last month were due to energy and food, and most of that was indeed due to energy. And so this is really the result of the United States and countries everywhere coming out of a historic pandemic, where we have seen these ongoing challenges with supply chains, these fragile supply chains that businesses have created around the world that have made it difficult to get products to shelves in the time of this recovery from a pandemic. You add on top of that this unprovoked war that Putin has been waging in the Ukraine, and that is why we've seen prices rise. So these gas prices, and again, as you pointed out, this is a global phenomena. Again, coming out of the pandemic is global, the supply chain challenges are global, and the energy challenges are also global.
Absolutely, there's no question about that, but the countries I just listed that have lower year-to-year rates of inflation at last measurements, they've all been hit by the pandemic and by energy prices as well, and I'm just trying to understand why it's a higher rate of inflation here in the United States.
Well, there are other countries that do have higher rates than the U.S. I mean, certainly countries have their baskets of goods and particular things affecting their economies. But overall, what we see is this global trend towards higher prices. And you see many countries that are reaching record peaks like the United States. And again, it is because, in large part right now, because of this energy crisis. And so figuring out ways to contain the crisis in energy, and for countries like the United States and Europe, of course, is taking concrete steps to wean ourselves off of these global oil markets, because that is what's making all of these economies so vulnerable right now. It's why the president continues to focus on his clean energy agenda that can help make sure that we see prices in the future that are lower and less volatile than what we and other countries are seeing today.
I do understand the measures that you say the president has taken on gas prices. I also understand there are measures that the president cannot take alone. In a New York Times article today, there was a former Carter administration official who was warning, don't make the mistakes, he said, that we made. And he basically says, don't take half measures, take full measures, do whatever you can. There are things still the president can do that he hasn't. For instance, the tariffs on Chinese products. Why not?
Well, the president has focused on a series of steps. You know, for the past year, the target had been making sure that supply chains were functional because that was core to inflation. As the challenge has focused on energy, that is where his priority has been. Focusing on taking what steps he can do to increase the supply of oil and refined products to gas stations. You know, so he has put all options on the table, and has even, of course, put on the table this idea of a federal gas tax holiday and encouraged states to do the same. So he has taken the steps that he has taken a variety of steps so far, and continues to look at all of his options.
All right, Heather Boushey, member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, thank you for being with us this morning.
All right, joining us now is the anchor of CNN Newsroom, Poppy Harlow. Such an interesting interview, and I want to take it back to where it began, which was playing for her the voices of Americans who are struggling. And I wonder, and look, maybe it's only so much that the White House can control, Poppy, but if I'm that single mom whose voice is cracking as she's talking about her financial situation, I don't know if I feel so much better after listening to that.
Didn't you feel that listening to her? I was just thinking, what if that were me for our kids, right? And that is so many Americans right now. Everyone's feeling it everywhere. There's a lot more the White House can do. You're totally right about the Carter administration, that piece. Not only the former Carter Treasury Secretary, a number of high-ranking economic officials came out and said, don't make the same mistakes we did. Price caps don't work. A gas tax holiday for 3 months is going to cost a lot and have very little effect. And as everything else gets more expensive, they just put the money to that, which you pointed out to her. There is more they can do. They can't do everything, but I don't understand still why no decision has been made on the China tariffs. I don't understand. I mean, the head of President Obama's Export-Import Bank said in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, do it and do it now. It could save American households $1,000 a year and bring down inflation 1% within a year. So I don't know why you wouldn't make a decision on that now when you hear people like this.
Yeah, no, she clearly, and by the way, I want to give full credit. You pointed out to me that New York Times article and helped me understand, I think, some of the things that are important here, because the issue is what can and can't the White House do. There are things the White House can't do. Some of the things they have done may have contributed a little bit to the fall of gas prices over the last month.
Maybe. Let's hope. A little. Yes, for sure. I don't think there's a lack of will and a lack of trying, but I do think that at some point, I mean, she talked about the war in Ukraine being a driver of inflation. Yes, but as you pointed out, all these other countries are facing those same two headwinds of the pandemic and the war. Jerome Powell, in his testimony last month, was specifically asked, is the war in Ukraine the primary driver of inflation? He said no. It's not the primary driver. So being very honest with how we got here, why we got here, where we were wrong, like Treasury Secretary Yellen did concede, which is important, helps us figure out how we can get out of this. But to your point, Brianna, at the beginning, not only is it inflation, real wages, as we were talking about earlier. So real wages, what you feel like you're taking home, hourly workers, they're lower. They're down 3.6% over the last 12 months. So you feel like you're making less. You are realistically, and you're spending so much more.
You're spending more, and then the savings is just going out the window.
Out the window. And then these student loan payments will start again in a month. And so there you go.
Poppy, thank you so much. We'll be tuning into you at the top of the hour.
See you then.
So first on CNN, former President Trump tried to call a member of the White House support staff who was talking with the January 6th committee. Our new reporting on this ahead.
We are here in Abu Dhabi, the capital of United Arab Emirates, and we are in Rahal Ranch. You come here, it's totally different.
Yeah!
You'll enjoy the real energy of the land. I am an international horse master who... Come on, boys. You got to understand the psychology of the horse, not just to train the horse and get him fit and ride him. The job we do here, control a horse basically from distance. How clever is that? The Arabian horse got the stamina, he got the beauty, he got the power. We have people come from all over the world. They stay here at the ranch as well. They have lessons here. We go right in the wild of the Arabian desert. It's just so beautiful.
My name is Jane Herdlicka. I'm the CEO of Virgin Australia. The airline lost nearly $2 billion over its last 8 years. 2,400 contracts we ripped up and renegotiated. We got rid of our long-haul operation, which was structurally uncompetitive. We got rid of a regional business that was also structurally uncompetitive. We focused back on our core, which was a 737 operation serving Australians. Fixing the basics of the business model, that was just a really unique opportunity. And to do it in the middle of COVID, it's really galvanizing to try to figure out how, in the worst moments of aviation, you can take a business and rebuild it and leverage all these amazing people to really do something special.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
Malumnis, it's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
History in the making. Golf's Open Championship now underway at the iconic St Andrews in Scotland. The 150th battle for the coveted Claret Jug. American great Tiger Woods now just 90 minutes or so away from his first round tee-off. Brad on a bike at the Tour de France. Bradley Wiggins joining us live with the very latest on the key runners and riders this Bastille Day. And what a match we just had at the Women's Euros. Why, it's finally Dutch delight for the defending champions. Hi there, live from Atlanta, the world-famous Tour de France and St Andrews, Scotland this Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to start right there in Scotland, the 150th Open Championship and the battle for the coveted, the prized Claret Jug, where play is in full swing at this hour out there on the old course. Some early storylines developing very nicely indeed just after, 1:29 p.m. right now in Scotland. The USA's Cameron Young leading the way at 7 under par late on in his round. Australian star Cameron Smith, who completed his first round just a few moments ago, he's at 5 under par after his 67. Keep an eye too on Northern Ireland's Rory McIlroy, right in the mix at 4 under. I want to give a special shout out to the young English amateur Barclay Brown, also at 4 under after a 68 on this day. Let's get straight out to St Andrews, where we do find CNN World Sports' Alex Thomas. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. We are feeling the excitement, and I imagine the fans there must be absolutely clamouring to get to see the great Tiger Woods tee off just a little bit later.
Yeah, a record crowd of almost 300,000 expected here this week. That's what the Open organisers have told us. A bit chillier on this opening day for the 150th Open, but the atmosphere is certainly very warm. You can see in the distance behind me the 13th, 12th holes, and we're already hearing chants of Rory rolling over with the offshore breeze here on this beautiful stretch of links on the east coast of Scotland, the home of golf. It gets every player, young and old, excited about playing this championship, playing this sport, and that's why we've seen such an interesting leaderboard, such a mix of names there. But as you say, most of them holding their breath, waiting for the GOAT to tee off, the greatest of all time, Tiger Woods, who we thought we may never see play competitive golf again after that horrific car accident last year. But he's back here now, and he said that he's really used getting back here as motivation.
For the most part of my rehab was just I was hoping that I could walk again. But lo and behold, I've played championship golf this year. And once I realized that I could possibly play at a high level, you know, my focus was to get back here at St Andrews to play in this championship. I just didn't want to miss this Open, you know, here at the home of golf. This has meant so much to me.
And take a look at one of his playing partners tweeted out. Max Homa is not exactly a rookie, he's a PGA Tour regular, but all these guys are so in awe of Tiger Woods. He said, I'm playing with Tiger Woods at the 150th Open Championship at St Andrews. Hey, golf gods, we're even. Can't believe this is real. And yeah, it's corny, but who cares? I'm playing with the freaking GOAT. So Tiger Woods makes even grown men sort of feel like kids on the morning of Christmas again. And I asked what chances he realistically had of lifting the claret jug for a 4th time and the 3rd time here at the home of golf by speaking to golf writers Dan Rappaport and Alan Shipnuck.
This is chess, this isn't golf, and no one's ever done it better than him as a strategist, as a tactician. So he can certainly play in the wind, he can roll the ball out there off the tee and negate some of the distance he's lost. So if he's got one more hurrah, you would think it's going to be here. And I think the other players have such reverence and awe for Tiger. They also don't want to Stephen Ames themselves.
No one's going to be like, yeah, Tiger's done.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big ask. You know, watching him at the JB McManus Pro-Am, he looked stiff, he looked kind of out of it. So if there's anyone else on the planet other than Tiger Woods, you say he has 0 chance. But if he wakes up on Thursday and he feels loose, he's still got the magic in his hands. Like, you never know.
I think he does have a chance this week, and I think everything is aligning for him. The course is extremely firm, which is really important for him. He doesn't fly at 300 yards. He can't keep up on these U.S. Open style layouts like he used to. If there's ever one guy that you just absolutely under no circumstances count out, it's Tiger Woods. And I think if you look at his preparation for the week, he had played, or walked at least, 58 holes by noon on Tuesday. That's a lot of holes. That shows me that this guy isn't here to just come out here, shoot 76, 74, you know, wave on the bridge and go home. He thinks he has a chance this week, and he's preparing like a guy who's thinking about winning a major.
Could a live golfer win this week?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good golfers who are playing on the Live Golf Tour. I mean, could Dustin Johnson win this week? Of course. Could Abraham Ancer win this week? Probably a little bit less likely, but it's definitely possible. Patrick Reed is an unbelievable short game. That's always important here. Touch and guile and controlling spin. I mean, it's definitely possible. It would be very, very spicy. And I think the R&A and I think all the guys who haven't gone to Live are crossing their fingers that doesn't happen. It would be sort of a discordant scene with all the pomp and circumstance and the goodwill here and having a controversial winner.
What's the next battleground for this contest?
Well, it could be in court. I mean, anecdotally, the Department of Justice has been sniffing around with some players, looking into antitrust matters. Certainly, we saw what Ian Poulter did at the Scottish Open to get the injunction. So seems like the lawyers are going to make almost as much money as the players. But without a doubt, there is a drama within the sport, because the LIV guys, they came from all different corners of the golf world, and there's some very pungent personalities over there, but they have been melded together, and they do have an us against them mentality, because they've all taken criticism and they felt ostracized, and it means a lot. They're pulling for each other. They really want to plant that flag.
We look at the top of the world golf rankings. I think more than half of the top 20 haven't won a major yet. So would it be a surprise to have a surprise winner this week?
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I think if you look at sort of the recent majors, a lot of times it has been a lot of big names. I guess Phil was a big surprise, but he's still Phil Mickelson. But we do seem to be kind of overdue for one of these shock winners where they come out of nowhere. There do seem to be kind of a crop of guys that you can count on being there on Sunday. So yeah, I would be surprised, but in this game, anything can happen, especially with the wind blowing and how firm it is. Someone can get the right side of the draw and get hot, and it's definitely possible.
Dan and Alan speaking to me only a couple of days ago. Already some of those predictions seeming to come true. We've had a good round from Ian Poulter, one of the LIV golfers already, holding a putt of more than 100 yards for an eagle during his opening round of 69. So it is an interesting leaderboard, a lot of variety on there early on this first day, Patrick.
Alex, those two certainly know what they are talking about, don't they? Let's talk a little bit about Rory McIlroy, 2014 champion at the Royal Liverpool Golf Club on the Wirral Peninsula. How's he been doing so far today, and how do you assess his chances this week?
His chances are great, Patrick, and he's doing really well on the opening day. 4 under par through the opening 11, 12 holes or so. Hasn't dropped a shot yet. Looks like he's got his game in control, every aspect of it. We know that at times, sometimes the short game can let him down. Sometimes he's not great with the putter. And sometimes his driving can get a bit erratic, no matter how lovely it looks. And that's why he's so popular. He speaks his mind. He's got a swing to die for. He's exciting to play. He's cavalier on the course at sometimes. Missed the Open last time it was here at St Andrews in 2015 because he hurt himself playing football with his mates. Made sure he hasn't done that again in the build-up to this week. And in 2010, when the Open was also here at St Andrews, hit a record score in the opening round. So he knows how to get it round the old links with a low score, is taking advantage of the better conditions so far. But, we've seen Rory in contention early on before and fade away. His fans will be hoping that doesn't happen again this week.
All right, Alex Thomas there. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time, Alex, and the team at the iconic St Andrews on this Thursday. Still ahead, the very latest from the Tour de France. That's coming our way. Thursday, stage 12 in moments. We're joined live by the 2012 winner, Sir Bradley Wiggins, who's right there at this hour amid the sport's most iconic climb. Stay with us.
Boer Group is one of Africa's largest foods, mining, manufacturing and infrastructure companies, with key investments in cement, sugar, edible oils, flour and pasta, construction, oil and gas, ports operations, amongst others. With these investments, Boer Group is unlocking the economic potential of Africa. Boer Group, unlocking opportunities.
I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta in New York, and this is CNN.
We're back now with the very latest from cycling's toughest challenge, the world-famous Tour de France. At this hour, competitors faced with a daunting challenge of trying to handle the 165-kilometre stage 12, which finishes with the iconic Alpe d'Huez climb on this Bastille Day in France as well. On Wednesday, the coveted maillot jaune, or the yellow jersey, dramatically changing hands after the Danish cyclist Jonas Vingegaard powering his way through to seize the overall lead after a gripping final climb of stage 11. The 25-year-old Dane, who had been 39 seconds adrift at one point, bursting clear of two-time defending champion from Slovenia, Tadej Pogačar, on the Col du Granon to seal his first Tour stage victory. Well, 10 years ago in 2012, Sir Bradley Wiggins becoming the first British rider to win the Tour de France. He also won 5 Olympic gold medals during his storied career. Now retired, he's become Eurosport's GCN cycling expert and fronts their innovative segment, Brad on a Bike, getting up close and personal with some of the world's best cyclists while they're literally in action on the bike. I'm delighted to say joining us now live from right there out on the course during stage 12 is Bradley, and thanks so much for your time, Bradley. Let's start with Vingegaard, because what an impact he's making. What for you makes him such a standout talent and competitor?
Incredible, yes. Yesterday he took it to the two-time winner Tadej Pogačar. And he's just a young kid, you know, he's not been in the sport very long, but he's hit the heights very quickly. He's Danish, he aims to be the first Danish winner since Bjarne Riis in 1996. He was actually born in 1996, but he's in yellow with an incredibly strong team around him with Wout van Aert, who's pretty much sealed the green jersey competition. But you see me now, we're just coming off the Col de Galibier, hitting speeds of well in excess of 100 kilometers an hour here, and I'm so close, you can't see it on the camera at the moment, but there's a rider in front of me, Nelson Oliveira from Portugal, and I could almost touch him. He's that close to me, and it's such a privilege to be in such a close proximity to these riders.
Yeah, just an incredible vantage point, so strong visually as well. Really feel like we're part of the race. Let's talk more about Pogačar, trying to win it for a third straight year. You know what it's like to be the one they're all trying to beat, Bradley. To what extent, though, in your expert view, might he just be feeling some kind of pressure right now?
Yeah, well, his team's been hit quite hard, the UAE team, with a couple of positive COVID tests, so they've had to withdraw from the race. So he's pretty low on teammates, which is a big thing in the Tour de France. You know, you can't win the Tour de France alone. You need a strong squad of 7 riders around you. So his back's up against the wall. But Tadej Pogačar, when his back's up against the wall, he comes back out on the offensive. And let's not write him off just yet. He's the reason he's won the Tour de France 2 times running. And I think today, with the mighty Alpe d'Huez that we finish on, Tadej's going to come back to the fore, really, because this race is not done yet.
All of which needs me very nicely indeed to talk about exactly where you are now. Let's get right onto the course with you, so to speak. So we got stage 12 today. It's the historic, the iconic Alpe d'Huez climb there on Bastille Day as well in France. What's it like being there right now, Bradley? And just how daunting a challenge is this for the cyclists?
Well, it's one of the most famous climbs in the Tour de France history. There's so much history and so many riders that have gone before on the Alpe d'Huez, of course, with the famous 24 hairpins. I think it's 24. And there's almost a famous, there's a nation in Holland that have adopted one of the corners. It's called Dutch Corner. So the festivities will be high there. There's not many crowds on the road at this point here. There was yesterday as we came up the opposite way yesterday up here up the Col de Galibier. But I think everyone's amassed on the famous Alpe d'Huez today to see a spectacle. And we're hoping we're going to get a spectacle like we did yesterday with those big hitters coming to the fore. And we haven't been back to the Alpe d'Huez since 2018, when, of course, our very own Geraint Thomas won the stage and the race indeed. So it's all set for fireworks today.
It's going to be a fascinating few hours ahead. You touched on the COVID situation impacting this tour, and that's a really significant storyline. We've got the heat as well. How are the competitors handling the heat, the extreme heat, right there on the Tour de France? And you're right there as well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big issue to contend with for the riders. Obviously, they're used to racing in hot temperatures, but when you're climbing the mountains, the air is no air. There's not much movement, so obviously you don't get cooling down. But lots of cold water being poured over the heads of the riders. And what they do now these days is a lot of the cars in the cool boxes carry women's tights or women's stockings, and they fill them with ice cubes. and they've given those out the cars and they put them down the back of their neck, and so they've got the drawstring out the end here, and that ice just melts down the back over the next 20-30 minutes there. So bit of a unique way to keep cool, but that's the way that the riders are doing it here in 2022.
All right, Bradley, thank you so much. Fascinating insights. Really learned a lot there. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right, well, a reminder, viewers can indeed watch the Tour de France live on Discovery Plus, Eurosport as well, and GCN Plus 2. Plenty of options there. OK, we check in on the Women's Euros in England just ahead. 2 matches on the slate for later on today. We'll be telling you why Sweden's footballers are feeling a good deal of relief this Thursday. Stick around.
Transformation, technology, new Marketplace Europe.
All aboard for the great European getaway. The summer tourist season is turning red hot.
Marketplace Europe, Saturday on CNN.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus, fact versus fiction.
We will govern for 100 years.
His vision is almost messianic.
Bannon sees himself as the narrator in a grand conspiracy of his own devising.
In rare interviews, CNN investigates the man and his master plan.
It's like you have no proof. We've looked at all the facts.
What did Bannon bring to you?
Bannon was calling the plays. He seems to have no limits.
CNN Special Report, Steve Bannon, Divided We Fall, Monday on CNN.
Welcome back to CNN's World Sport this Thursday. A short while ago, the WNBA star Brittany Griner arriving in a Russian court for a hearing. This a week after pleading guilty to drug charges. The two-time U.S. Olympic basketball gold medalist arrested back in February this year at a Moscow area airport on accusations of attempted drug smuggling, an offence punishable by up to 10 years in prison. We'll stay across the very latest for you through this day and indeed beyond. Now, despite this being one of the most anticipated Open Championships, the topic of the controversial Live Golf Series, well, it just keeps coming up, doesn't it? The highly lucrative breakaway venture, which has been bankrolled by the government of Saudi Arabia, has signed up some of the biggest names in the sport, like Phil Mickelson, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau. This week in Scotland, though, Tiger Woods making his views very clear indeed, saying the Live golfers have turned their backs, as he put it, on what made them. While Rory McIlroy's highly principled stance has in recent weeks led to some people hailing him as the moral compass of his sport, World Sport's Don Riddell now.
It's a weird time in professional golf.
That would be an understatement. But as the world of golf has been fractured by the emergence of the lucrative but highly controversial Live Golf Series, Rory McIlroy seems to have found the words to describe it.
Any decision that you make in your life that's purely for money usually doesn't end up going the right way. My dad said to me a long time ago, once you make your bed, you lie in it. And they've made their bed. So, you know, that's their decision and they have to live with that.
McIlroy's principled stance and outspoken views have led to some describing him as the moral compass of his sport.
Rory McIlroy seems to be made for this moment. He has become kind of the spokesman not just for the PGA Tour, but for all of healthy, clean, good competition, doing things for the right reasons.
It's like I'm just being me and living my life and doing what I think is right and trying to play the best golf that I possibly can. I mean, I wasn't asked to be put here. I wasn't trying to be in this position. I'm just being me.
I don't think he set out to be placed on a pedestal. He didn't set out to become the conscience of professional golf. That's not what he's like. Rory speaks from the heart. He says what he thinks. He's just being himself. He answers very well, which is why people in my position ask him questions routinely about the broader picture in golf.
Here's a guy who's taking in the totality of a situation, understands sort of his place in the game as a spokesperson, as a leader, and I find him to be admirable.
He's able to view things in a 30,000-foot view as opposed to just, I want the money right now. And he cares about his legacy. But he cares about his legacy because he's good enough to have a legacy.
A golfer's legacy will inevitably be based on their achievements. McIlroy is well placed in that regard, a four-time major champion who's now won more events on the PGA Tour than Australian Greg Norman, one of the driving forces behind the LIV Series. But McIlroy might find that in the long run, his principles will also reward him.
I think a good comparison for Rory would be like an Arnold Palmer. You know, Arnold Palmer did not win the most major championships, but he's absolutely legendary for the person that he was and how much he grew the game and how much he cared about growing the game.
It's very hard to say how history will judge so many of these guys. I think the ones who have gone to play there have made a bad judgment call. I'm open about that. Rory McIlroy thinks they made a bad judgment call. He's called it short-termism. But who knows? Because, listen, it's gone a lot further than many of us thought it would already.
And there's the rub. Nobody can predict what LIV will become and how the landscape will look when the dust has all settled. Who else will join LIV? And will the committed PGA Tour players end up changing their tune? It's too soon to know what even Rory McIlroy will be saying 12 months from now. Don Riddell, CNN.
Don for that. And by the way, Rory going very nicely indeed at the Open Championship. 5 under par right now on the 13th hole, 3 back. Rory going very nicely indeed. The very latest from the Women's European Football Championships just ahead on this day. And the Blues finally get their man. It's the first signing of a whole new era for Chelsea Football Club. Why, it could be just the start too.
Following the great success of the 29th Afreximbank annual meetings in Cairo, Afreximbank would like to thank His Excellency, the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Central Bank of Egypt, representatives of heads of state, government officials, dignitaries, our illustrious speakers, sponsors, and all attendees. The meetings featured a full program of events, bringing together high